The scent of chlorine hung heavy in the warm California air, battling against the faint citrus notes from a nearby grove. I was leaning against a stucco pillar, nursing a sparkling water, watching the pool party unfold around me. My gaze wasn't on the shimmering water, or the laughter, or even the blonde woman in the gold dress who had just walked past me. Instead, my focus had snagged on the woman by the snack table, Mariah Diaz, my client's graphic designer. She was smiling, but the slight tension around her eyes, a micro-expression of polite endurance, was almost imperceptible to anyone not trained to read the precise mechanics of a vintage engine. You know that feeling when you see a subtle flaw in something everyone else considers perfect? That was Mariah. Skylar, Mariah's younger sister, the woman in the gold dress, swept up to us, a laugh bubbling out of her. "Oh, August, you're chatting up my sister? You know I'm the prettier one, right?" She tossed her blonde hair, a practiced, charming joke she probably used often. Mariah's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she met my eyes, a quick flick of vulnerability there before it vanished. I hadn't even processed the full implication of Skylar's words when my own came out, quiet and firm, cutting through the casual chatter around us. I was never looking at her. The music seemed to soften, the surrounding party noise a distant hum. Mariah's gaze held mine, a flicker of something raw and exposed, and suddenly the casual party air felt charged with unspoken questions. I wasn't a social butterfly. My shop, Watson Restorations, was a sanctuary of steel, grease, and the honest roar of a rebuilt engine. I preferred the logical progression of a mechanical problem to the nuanced chaos of human interaction. Mariah, with her sharp wit and even sharper observational skills, was a new variable. My shop was in the same small coastal town where Mariah had her studio, a stone's throw from the beach, and our paths had crossed a few times through mutual clients. But this was different. Her graphic design studio, Mariah's Mark, was struggling, I'd heard through the local grapevine, and the lease on her old building was reportedly giving her trouble. Skylar, a realtor who often managed property for her absentee father, was a common thread in those rumors. The party atmosphere felt thin, almost transparent, revealing the underlying currents of obligation and quiet desperation. The following Tuesday, a week after the party, a battered but beautiful 1968 Mustang Fastback rolled into my shop. It was Mariah's. She stood in the doorway, her white Henley shirt replaced by a paint-splattered denim jacket, her posture a mix of defiance and exhaustion. "It needs a full overhaul," she stated, her voice steady, but I noticed the subtle tremor in her right hand as she pushed a stray strand of rich brown hair away from her face. "But the priority? The brakes. They stick sometimes. It nearly put me through a fence last night." She didn't have to over-explain. The words hung heavy with the implication of danger. I just nodded, already visualizing the worn calipers and compromised fluid lines. I noticed her eyes, a deep, warm brown, held a hint of apprehension as she scanned the grease-stained concrete of my workspace. Her expression made me want to solve every unseen problem she might have. I opened the hood of the Mustang, the heavy metal groaning, and the distinct smell of old oil and gasoline filled the air. "The sticking brakes are a significant safety hazard, Mariah," I explained, running a gloved hand over the master cylinder. "The seals are failing. Fluid isn't flowing correctly. It's not just a minor inconvenience. It could lock up completely at speed, and then you're looking at a serious incident." Her eyes were fixed on my hands, on the way my fingers deftly unclipped a hose. "We're talking about a full hydraulic system replacement. Master cylinder, booster, all 4 calipers, new steel lines, flushed with DOT4 fluid. It's a precision job. If even a speck of dirt gets in, we'll have issues." I could feel the instinct to detail every step, every tool, every potential failure point. She just nodded slowly, a small, tired breath escaping her. Her problem was clear, and my method was the only way through it. She simply said, "Do what you do, August. Just make it safe." It wasn't a request for a quote. It was a plea for certainty in a world that felt uncertain. Over the next few days, Mariah spent more time at the shop than I'd expected. She worked on her laptop in the small, dusty office, the hum of my air compressor a constant backdrop to her quiet tapping. One afternoon, while I was under the Mustang, replacing the seized brake lines with new stainless steel, a process that required careful bending and flaring to ensure no leaks under pressure, I overheard a snippet of her phone conversation. "Skylar, I told you, I need more time. The rent on the new space isn't ready. No, Dad won't cut me off. He just trusts you." Her voice was tight, a thread of quiet desperation in it. When she ended the call, her shoulders were slumped. I emerged from under the car, wiping grease from my brow. "Landlord troubles?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She jumped slightly, startled, and then gave me a weak, almost imperceptible shake of her head. I kept my hands firmly in my pockets, fighting the urge to offer a comforting touch. That conversation had confirmed her problem, and I knew there was more to it than just a car repair. Mariah's problem wasn't just old brakes. It was a tightening vice of financial and familial pressure. Skylar, her sister, had delivered a formal notice by the end of the week. The lease on Mariah's current studio was not being renewed. An aggressive letter from Diaz Property Management, LLC, Skylar's father's company, now largely run by Skylar, stated Mariah had 2 weeks to vacate, citing deferred maintenance as the primary reason. It was an obvious play to push Mariah out, likely to sell the valuable commercial space. Mariah walked into my shop that morning clutching the letter, her knuckles white. She looked like she hadn't slept, a nervous habit of twisting a small silver ring on her finger. I'd seen that look before, the one that said someone was about to lose everything they had built. I found myself pausing mid-sentence, during an explanation of rotor runout, catching myself from droning on. Mariah was sitting on an upturned oil drum, looking at the lease non-renewal notice, her brow furrowed. "It's just, I thought I had more time," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She smoothed the crinkled paper on her knee, then glanced at me. Her eyes held a deep weariness I recognized. She wasn't asking for my opinion on the lease, but for some kind of stability. My instinct was to list every legal precedent for wrongful eviction, to explain the exact clauses she could leverage, but I forced myself to just be quiet for a moment. My own hands, usually busy with a wrench or a rag, remained in my pockets, clenched lightly. "They're using a common tactic," I finally said, my voice low. "Citing maintenance issues to break a lease early, especially if it's a month-to-month, can be tricky, but they have to document those issues properly. If they haven't given you written notice of specific deficiencies before the non-renewal, their case weakens." It was the over-explainer in me, trying to bring logic to emotional chaos. Mariah looked up, a spark of something, curiosity, hope, in her eyes. "You think—" I met her gaze, held it, then deliberately broke it to look at the workshop door, reminding myself of the boundaries. "I think you have options, legally." The next few days were a blur of metal dust, engine fumes, and legal jargon. Mariah started bringing me coffee in the mornings, black with no sugar, just how I liked it, a detail she'd remembered after one casual mention. It was a small act, but it felt like a soft anchor. She'd then sit in the dusty office, hunched over her laptop, researching property law. I, in turn, found myself cleaning the office area more meticulously, ensuring her space was a little less grimy than the rest of the shop. The Mustang was coming together. I was calibrating the carburetor, ensuring the precise air-fuel mixture for optimal performance, a delicate process requiring specialized vacuum gauges and a fine-tuned ear. Mariah walked in, her phone pressed to her ear, listening. Her face paled, and she ended the call abruptly. "The city inspector is doing an unscheduled safety audit on my studio building tomorrow morning," she announced, her voice strained. "Skylar just called to warn me. It feels like retaliation." My head snapped up from the engine. A surprise audit, timed perfectly with her eviction notice. It wasn't a coincidence. This was Skylar, or rather, Diaz Property Management, systematically applying pressure. The next morning, the air in Mariah's studio was thick with nervous energy. The scent of fresh paint and solvent hung heavy, a stark contrast to the sterile clipboard held by Mr. Henderson, the city inspector. My stomach dropped a little. This wasn't just about Mariah's studio. My own shop was attached to the same property. I stood near the back, my presence a silent statement. Mariah, despite the tremor in her hands, was doing her best to answer Henderson's questions, pointing out updated fire extinguishers and emergency exits. He was methodical, almost robotic, clearly enjoying the power. "And the ventilation system in the paint booth, Ms. Diaz?" he asked, tapping his pen against a line on his form. "I see no recent certification." Mariah froze, her carefully constructed calm fracturing. She had been waiting for the ventilation contractor for weeks. Skylar knew this. "I've called them repeatedly, Mr. Henderson, but actually, Mr. Henderson, if you look at Section 41, 2C of the City Planning Code," I interjected, stepping forward, my voice cutting through the tension. "A temporary waiver for non-critical repairs with a documented service request is permissible for up to 3 weeks, provided no immediate hazard exists." I spoke clearly, explaining the logical flaw in his immediate interpretation. Henderson stopped, his pen paused mid-air. He looked at me, then back at Mariah, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. I continued, "Mariah submitted the request for an HVAC contractor 3 weeks ago, per her dated emails. The delay is on the service provider, not the tenant. The system is functional, it just lacks the updated certification due to external scheduling." My over-explainer mode was in full swing, but it was serving a purpose. Mariah looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I met her gaze, a steadying anchor in the storm. Henderson, clearly irritated by being schooled, conceded with a tight nod, making a note. But the relief was short-lived. He moved to the back, to a small, rickety wooden ramp leading to a storage loft. "And this ramp? Clearly not up to code for commercial use. No handrails, unstable risers. This constitutes an immediate safety hazard." He made a definitive mark on his clipboard. "I'm afraid I'll have to red tag this section. No access to the loft until properly secured." Mariah's breath caught, a shaky exhale. That loft held all her archived design work, years of irreplaceable creative output. My jaw tightened. Skylar had been thorough. My internal monologue was already running through options, identifying the root cause, an intentional system failure, exploited by an antagonist who knew the rules. This was an obvious attempt to shut down her ability to work and force her hand on the lease. The red tag on the storage loft felt like a brand, marking Mariah's studio as unsafe, unsustainable. Skylar, ever the helpful sister, sent a follow-up email that afternoon, offering to help Mariah liquidate her assets before the eviction deadline. It was a thinly veiled attempt to corner her, a shark circling. I saw Mariah clutching her phone, reading the email. Her shoulders hunched, and for a moment she looked so small, so defeated. I walked over, my hands still in my pockets, trying to maintain distance. "She's not offering help," I stated, the bluntness of CS-71 overriding my caution. She's offering to pick over the bones. Mariah flinched, then looked up, her dark eyes wide. I know, August, she whispered, twisting her ring. But what else can I do? I don't have another option. It feels like I'm losing everything. The words were quiet, but the fear behind them was loud. I needed to move fast, to create stability. I pulled out a small, worn notebook and a pen. The ramp. It's a temporary hazard, but fixable. If we install compliant handrails and reinforce the risers, we can call for a reinspection. I looked at her, searching for a sign of resistance. I have the tools. We can get the materials. It's not a full build, but it will bring it up to code. It will remove this particular leverage point. She hesitated, then a slow nod. Okay, she said, her voice a little stronger. Okay, but how? My mind was already calculating load-bearing specs, lumber dimensions, and city codes. The plan formed, concrete and immediate. This was a direct, practical response to the problem, not just talk. Over the next 2 days, the workshop transformed. I brought over my portable saw, impact driver, and a stack of treated lumber. The air, usually filled with the scent of Mariah's delicate paints and paper, now carried the sharp aroma of sawdust. I measured, cut, and assembled, my hands moving with the precision of years spent aligning metal and wood. Mariah, instead of working on designs, watched, sometimes handing me a screw or a level without me even asking, her presence a quiet hum in the background. She was focused, completely absorbed in the practical details, a rare stillness in her usually bustling energy. The weight distribution, August, she pointed out one afternoon, her finger tracing a diagram I'd sketched. If we put the diagonal supports here, it distributes the load more evenly, reducing deflection on the main beam. Her observation was sharp, insightful, and surprisingly accurate. I paused, my hands still. She hadn't been an interior designer, but her understanding of structure was evident in her creative work. I caught myself almost correcting a minor technical detail, a reflex from my CS-71 over-explainer nature, but I swallowed the urge. She was right, and her perspective was invaluable. My impact wrench whirred as I tightened the last lag screw, securing the handrail to the newly reinforced ramp. The wood groaned under my weight as I tested it, solid and unyielding. The scent of pine was strong, masking the metallic tang of the car shop. It's safe, Mariah, I said, stepping back, wiping sawdust from my gray t-shirt. She ran her hand along the smooth railing, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips, easing the tension around her eyes. I noticed her expression, a silent triumph. Thank you, August, she whispered. Her words felt like a rare, precious gift. The problem of the red-tagged ramp was solved, but the larger threat of the eviction still loomed. She still looked trapped. The relief lasted only a few hours. That evening, a formal eviction notice arrived via certified mail, hand-delivered by a stony-faced courier. It wasn't just a non-renewal now, it was a demand for immediate possession, citing repeated safety violations, plural despite my quick fix on the ramp, and a fabricated clause about tenant-caused structural damage to the building foundation. The envelope also contained an official-looking document, a notice of property inspection for my shop, scheduled for next week, signed by Mr. Henderson. It was a clear escalation, a direct threat to both our livelihoods, linked by the same property. Skylar wasn't just trying to get rid of Mariah. She was trying to push me out, too, likely to clear the entire block for a bigger development. The paper in my hands felt cold, heavier than any wrench. My conversation with Mariah was terse, filled with the sterile language of legal threats and official notices. She had received a similar, even more aggressive notice. The building was old, its foundation settled over decades, a typical scenario for historic coastal properties. The structural damage claim was absurd, but it provided a legal hook. "This isn't about the ramp anymore," I said, running a hand through my hair. "This is about the whole property, Mariah. Skylar's moving fast." She nodded, her jaw tight, a familiar, determined glint in her eyes. "I know. My only leverage is that they haven't maintained the property themselves. They've ignored every request for actual repairs for years." It was a tiny thread, but we had to pull it. We knew the adversary. The next few days were a quiet storm of strategy. I spent hours poring over property deeds, construction permits, and city planning documents, the dense jargon. A familiar language to me, albeit usually applied to engine specifications rather than legal clauses. My aim was precise: find any maintenance requests Mariah had submitted, any permits Skylar had skipped, any code violations of her own. Mariah, in turn, gathered every email, every photo, every written complaint she had sent about leaking roofs, faulty wiring, and crumbling paint. The clock was ticking towards the city inspection for my shop, a clear act of intimidation. One afternoon, as I was cross-referencing a dated plumbing permit against the current building's blueprints, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. Mariah was standing there, a thermos in her hand. "You look like you haven't slept, August," she said, her voice soft, not correcting my posture or my focus. She simply set the thermos down. "Chamomile. It helps." I nodded, grateful for the small kindness. She understood the tunnel vision, the obsessive focus required to untangle a complex problem. My gaze, instead of jumping to her face, dropped to her hands, still twisting that silver ring. I saw a small, almost imperceptible tremor, a testament to the fear she was fighting. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but I knew words weren't enough. It had to be actions. The day of the city inspection for my shop arrived under a cloudless California sky. Mr. Henderson, the same inspector, marched in with Skylar, who wore a self-satisfied smirk. Her presence here was meant to be a show of force. My shop was clean, organized, every tool in its place, every classic car gleaming. But Skylar walked straight to the back, to a small, sealed drum holding waste oil. "And this, Mr. Henderson," she announced, her voice dripping with faux concern, "looks like a serious environmental violation. Unmarked, uncertified, a clear and present danger." She gestured grandly, playing to the inspector, clearly expecting a win. Mariah, standing beside me, flinched. I kept my voice calm, the volume low, but every word was precise. "Actually, Ms. Diaz," I said, stepping between Skylar and the drum, "that drum is clearly marked. Hazard Class 2 waste oil, sealed as per Section 74.3b of the County Waste Management Ordinance." I pointed to a small, almost invisible label on the side that I had affixed early that morning. "It's awaiting pickup by a certified hazardous waste hauler, scheduled for tomorrow morning. I have the manifest right here, Mr. Henderson." I handed him a clipboard with the printed proof, the time-stamped schedule of the pickup. Skylar's smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed. "And," I continued, meeting Henderson's gaze, "regarding the structural damage claim against Mariah's studio, I've cross-referenced those claims against actual county records. My findings suggest that the specific damage being cited is actually pre-existing wear and tear, documented in the 1992 city survey as minor foundational settling, not new damage caused by the current tenant." I paused, letting the silence hang. Mariah looked at me, her eyes shining with a silent gratitude. The room went quiet. Skylar's face, usually so composed, flushed with anger. Her leverage, built on lies and intimidation, was dissolving. The battle wasn't over. Skylar, furious, doubled down, threatening a full lawsuit for defamation and breach of contract. But her public show of force had failed, and now she looked desperate. We had bought ourselves time, and more importantly, credibility. Mariah, no longer just a designer, was now a fierce advocate for her business, empowered by the knowledge that she wasn't alone. We spent the evening gathering more evidence, compiling a meticulous binder of neglected repair requests and outdated permits for the property as a whole. The air between us was electric, not with attraction, but with the shared purpose of fighting an injustice. The next day, Mariah scheduled a meeting with the city's building department, requesting an official review of the entire property's maintenance history, not just her studio or my shop. She walked in, head held high, clutching the thick binder we had compiled. Skylar was there too, having somehow gotten wind of the meeting, her face a mask of annoyance. "This is completely unnecessary, Ms. Diaz," Skylar began, trying to take control of the narrative. "My sister is simply trying to deflect from her own responsibilities." Mariah met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Skylar," she stated, her voice steady and clear, carrying through the small, sterile meeting room. "This is about accountability. My studio has had a leaking roof for 6 months that you refused to fix. The electrical issues in August's shop have been reported twice. This isn't deflection. This is about ensuring a safe and compliant environment for all tenants." She opened the binder, her finger tapping on specific, dated photos. It was a public boundary statement, clear and firm. I watched from the back, hands in my pockets, a silent sentinel. I felt a surge of pride, a quiet awe for her courage. Her agency, her refusal to be a victim, solidified a choice in me. She was a force, and I was honored to stand beside her. Mariah's presentation to the city building department was a masterclass in calm, factual defiance. She laid out every neglected repair request, every dated photograph, every ignored email. Mr. Henderson, surprisingly, listened intently, his pen scribbling notes. Skylar, fuming, kept trying to interrupt, but Mariah held the floor, her voice steady. The turning point came when Mariah revealed a detailed email chain showing Skylar explicitly denying a roof repair request, claiming the cost was unjustifiable. This directly contradicted the deferred maintenance claim Skylar had initially made against Mariah. It flipped the blame entirely. The department agreed to a full, comprehensive property inspection, a real one, not a targeted intimidation. It would take place the following week, a final public showdown. The anticipation hung heavy. That evening, as we stood in my dimly lit shop, surrounded by the ghosts of classic cars, Mariah confessed, "I was terrified, August. Every time she spoke, I felt my stomach drop." She didn't look at me, but at the polished chrome of a vintage bumper. I didn't offer empty words. Instead, I simply said, "You didn't show it. You were clear. You were effective." I felt the familiar yearning to reach out, to reassure her, but I kept my hands still. It was enough to simply be present, to acknowledge her strength. The comprehensive property inspection was the real climax. The city's head building official, a stern woman named Ms. Albright, led a team through the entire property, Mariah and I trailing behind. Skylar was there too, flanked by a lawyer, trying to appear unbothered. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and nervous tension. Mariah methodically pointed out every neglected detail, from rusted pipes to crumbling fascia boards. Then came the moment. Ms. Albright stopped at the main structural beam in Mariah's studio, the one Skylar had cited in her eviction notice. The lawyer piped up, As you can see, Ms. Albright, this significant foundational settling poses a severe risk, exacerbated by Ms. Diaz's activities. I stepped forward, holding a worn, laminated blueprint. With all due respect, I began, my voice clear and measured. The original 1948 blueprints for this building, coupled with the city's own 1992 structural survey, indicate this settling is a minor, pre-existing condition, well within acceptable parameters for a building of this age. It's not significant foundational damage, and it certainly wasn't exacerbated by a graphic designer. In fact, a lack of regular maintenance on the exterior drainage has likely contributed to minor cosmetic cracking, which is the landlord's responsibility. I pointed to a specific section on the blueprint, then to the corresponding survey note. My competence, my precision, was undeniable. The room went silent. Mariah looked at me, her eyes conveying a gratitude that felt like coming home. Ms. Albright nodded slowly, reviewing my evidence. "Mr. Watson is correct," she stated, her voice authoritative. "The issues cited by Diaz Property Management are largely superficial or pre-existing, and their maintenance history on this property is lacking." Schuyler's lawyer looked stunned. The head official turned to Schuyler. "We're issuing a full abatement order to Diaz Property Management for numerous neglected repairs, with a 30-day compliance window. Ms. Diaz and Mr. Watson's leases will be reinstated and amended to include clauses for proper maintenance schedules. You will also be compensating Ms. Diaz for the cost of the emergency ramp repair." The hammer fell. The tension in the room snapped. Schuyler's face was white, her carefully constructed power finally crumbling. The room had gone quiet, completely still. Mariah looked at me, then at Ms. Albright, a deep, solid breath finally escaping her. She hadn't just saved her studio. She'd claimed her space, her business, and her dignity. The aftermath was surprisingly quiet. Schuyler disappeared, likely to deal with the mountain of abatement orders. Mariah's studio and my shop were safe. The next morning, Mariah brought me my coffee, just like any other day. But this time her smile was real, reaching her eyes. "So," she began, leaning against a workbench, "I have to figure out a new lease, and new maintenance clauses." She paused, then looked at me. A soft, deliberate gaze. "And I was thinking, maybe we could work on those clauses together. You seem to know a lot about them." It wasn't a question about the lease, it was an invitation. I felt a steadying pull, like a compass needle finding true north. "I think that's an excellent idea, Mariah," I replied, my voice rougher than usual. My hands, still in my pockets, a habit of restraint I couldn't quite break, felt a sudden, inexplicable lightness. She stepped closer, closing the small gap between us, a choice. Her hand, no longer twisting the ring, gently rested on my arm, a subtle connection. I looked into her deep brown eyes, seeing not just gratitude, but a quiet, powerful promise. The shop around us, usually a symphony of metal and oil, felt hushed, like a quiet room. I leaned in, my touch feather-light, a promise sealed against her forehead. Her acceptance, her trust, was the greatest repair I could ever make. My life, which had once felt like a perfectly restored engine running in isolation, now had a co-pilot. You know that feeling when you realize you've been working so hard to perfect something, but you're doing it all alone? I learned that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing for the machines in my shop, but for the people in my life. True victory isn't just winning a fight. It's sleeping with a clear conscience, knowing you stood for what's right, and that real love isn't about drama or chasing what everyone else sees. It's about finding quiet partnership the kind that anchors you and makes you stronger together. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.